The story of the Maui Silversword is one of perseverance, beauty, and the resilience of life. It starts on the highest peaks of Maui, where harsh winds and freezing temperatures challenge even the hardiest of plants. This is where the silversword, Argyroxiphium sandwicense, grows, a symbol of the delicate balance between life and environment. Maui's silversword plant is not just any plant. It is an ancient relic of Hawaii's volcanic origins, rooted deep within the island's history. The plant thrives only on the slopes of Haleakalā, a dormant volcano that rises 10,023 feet above sea level, where the air is thin and the sun burns fiercely. The stark environment, dry, cold, and often inhospitable to most life, has created a remarkable adaptation. The silversword's rosettes, which look like intricate clusters of silver needles, shine like a beacon against the backdrop of dark volcanic soil. It's as if nature herself painted the plant with a coat of shining armor to protect it from the harsh elements. The silversword's story, however, begins long before humans arrived in Hawaii. The plant's ancestors made their way to the islands millions of years ago, likely from a distant place, perhaps even South America, transported on the winds or carried by migrating animals. Over generations, as the Hawaiian archipelago formed and evolved, the plants began to change. They adapted to their environment, becoming a distinct species known only to this land. The evolution of the silversword is a fascinating tale of survival. Over centuries, the plant evolved to endure the island's unique conditions. Its long, needle-like leaves, which are covered in a fine layer of silver hairs, reflect the sun's harsh rays and trap moisture from the air. The hairs also shield the plant from the harsh winds that whip across the mountain, and its leaves curl slightly inward to conserve precious water. But the silversword's survival was not a simple feat. It required patience and time, slowly adapting to the changing climate and terrain. In the early days, the silversword was not a solitary plant. It was part of a thriving ecosystem, surrounded by other rare and unique species. These plants lived in harmony with each other, adapted to the volcanic landscape where life was fragile and scarce. Birds, insects, and even the occasional goat or wild boar helped spread the seeds of the silversword across the volcanic slopes, allowing the plant to slowly make its way up the mountain, following the cool, misty heights. Then came the arrival of humans. The first Polynesians to settle on the Hawaiian Islands brought with them not just their culture and knowledge but also animals, pigs, chickens, and later cattle. These introduced species had a profound effect on the island's ecosystems. They trampled delicate plant life and competed for resources that were already scarce. The silversword, like many native species, began to feel the pressure. As human settlement spread, so did farming, hunting, and grazing, bringing new challenges. But the silversword was not ready to disappear. It wasn't until the late 1800s, however, that scientists began to take notice of the silversword's uniqueness. By this time, the plant had already become rare, its existence confined to the upper reaches of Haleakalā. Early botanists made their way to Maui, enchanted by the plant's silvery beauty and its tenacity in such a harsh climate. They were quick to recognize it as something special, something that embodied the spirit of the Hawaiian wilderness. Despite its uniqueness, the silversword's survival was not assured. By the early 20th century, human activities and the encroachment of invasive species had already placed the plant at risk. Goats and sheep, both introduced by settlers, began to graze on the young plants, and their populations grew unchecked. This destruction of habitat, coupled with other threats such as fires and diseases, put the Silversword on the brink of extinction. The battle between humans and nature had reached a critical point. Efforts to save the Silversword began in earnest in the 1950s and 1960s. Botanists and conservationists, recognizing the importance of the plant, began to focus on protecting the remaining populations. Haleakalā National Park was established in 1961, and along with it came the promise of protection for the Silversword and other endangered species that called the mountain home. The park became a sanctuary where the Silversword could begin its slow recovery. But recovery was no simple task. The plant's habitat was a delicate one, and its future depended on carefully managing the land around it. With the removal of invasive species, efforts to control grazing animals, and a focused effort to restore the mountain's ecosystem, the Silversword started to show signs of life. Through careful monitoring and restoration projects, its numbers began to rise. Still, the plant was far from safe. It needed continued protection from threats, and there was always the looming danger of new challenges. By the 1980s and 1990s, the Silversword was being studied in greater detail. Scientists learned more about its delicate life cycle. The plant's flowering cycle is a remarkable aspect of its biology. After spending years slowly growing and building up energy, the Silversword bursts into life for one brief, spectacular moment. In its final year, it sends up a towering flower stalk, sometimes over 6 feet tall, adorned with hundreds of small, yellow flowers. This burst of life is both beautiful and bittersweet, as it is followed by the plant's death. The Silversword's life cycle is brief but intense, a reminder that life in the harshest environments must be both patient and resilient. Throughout the 1990s and into the 21st century, the Silversword remained a symbol of the ongoing fight to protect Hawaii's unique flora and fauna. Conservation programs aimed at restoring the health of Haleakala's ecosystems have expanded, and new generations of the Silversword have been carefully cultivated and replanted. In the face of modern challenges like climate change and the continued spread of invasive species, the Silversword's survival remains uncertain. But it has shown, over and over again, that it is a plant that can endure, a plant that will never give up. The story of the Maui Silversword is far from over. Today, conservationists continue their efforts to protect the plant's delicate ecosystem, recognizing that this is not just a battle for the Silversword itself, but for the preservation of the entire Hawaiian landscape. As we look to the future, the Silversword stands as a testament to the fragility of life and the strength it takes to survive. It's a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things in the world are the hardest to protect. The Silversword, with its shimmering leaves and fleeting flowers, is a symbol of the preciousness of nature, a symbol of hope and resilience in the face of adversity. If you enjoyed this documentary, give it a like, share it with someone who loves endangered plants and animals, and subscribe our channel Wild Hope for more interesting content. Thank you.